I am thrilled to have a great colleague and friend, Feli Sola-Carter, share her wealth of experience in leading change with you. Feli's amazing career in serving the public saw her grow from an entry-level interviewer to a senior executive at the Social Security Administration, coming from her home in Puerto Rico to New York City and then to their headquarters in Maryland. Feli's the recipient of 2 Presidential Rank Awards and continues to provide leadership and expertise to the federal sector, to national Hispanic organizations, and in her community as a member of the Board of Trustees of the Horizon Foundation, and currently as chair of the Board of Trustees of Howard Community College, where they were awarded with the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. But don't let Feli's executive poise and presence fool you. She's a woman of many dimensions, with a sharp wit, a ready smile, and some smooth dance moves. Her nickname is the Steel Butterfly, and just wait till you hear the walk-on music she chose.
So creating a sense of urgency reminds me of the earlier iteration of leading change efforts when the discussion was around burning platforms, and that became almost a cliche. But the concept there is that to the degree that you can underscore and help me understand the severity, the need for the change, that will go a long way towards helping me align with you in bringing that change about. Clearly, if it is a burning platform, I want to get off, I want to find a fire extinguisher, whatever it might be. To me, a sense of urgency is created by communication. But you need to think about who your audience is. Is it the key unofficial leader of a team who doesn't have the team leader title, but is the one who is respected by others whom you wish to engage with? Is it a key executive further up the line who has a particular interest in any outcome that affects the line of work that you're thinking about? Is it a process, is it an external party that has an interest in the activity that you're engaging in? All right. So thinking about the who, thinking about the how, communication, communication, communication. Thinking about the one small step approach, where you may want to start with a small step to test the waters and let's see how this resonates, and do I have all the facts? So communication is essential, tailored to the individual audience, and in fact I would argue audiences, because in any change you will have the recipient of the change, the enactor of the change, but all the other parties beyond that whose work processes, preferences, interests will be in some way altered by this change you want to make. Okay, so in a case where you are in a relatively new operation, new situation, it is my advice, has been my practice actually in every single instance where I have had this experience, from manager of a relatively small team of folks to managing a national operation, to as quickly as possible connect with the individuals whose lives I'm leading. Okay? Whether it's connecting shortly upon arrival by actually making the rounds if you're physically collocated with the person, by reaching out in a virtual environment such as we're using now, by finding out what that person's preferred mode of engagement is. Because if you are totally zoomed out, as we are now experiencing in some instances, perhaps a simple phone call might do. I don't have to worry about what I look like when I'm talking to this person. We can just have the conversation, you know. Perhaps some people might prefer a quick text to let them know that you're about to call them. That works with people of different generations. Don't ever just call me cold. Please text ahead of time before the call comes in, right? So it's understanding what the preferences are part of the individual. So start to build a relationship from day one and understanding what the person is about. If it's someone, if you're in a different situation and you're walking into what I think of as the middle of the movie, and there's a change effort that has started, and now you're it, okay? It is critical to be honest about the fact that you recognize that you're coming into the middle of the movie. And I was not one of the original script writers. I regret to tell you that, but we are here, and I am looking forward to working with you to help me figure out where do we go from here. How do we wrap up this project? What do we need to do? Where do we need to make some edits? What scenes do we need to add that we have not included because we didn't realize that you would be one of the leading actors in this role? And that is a way of appreciating and letting people know. It's a very critically important in any change effort to also be honest when it is not working as you had intended. And I have found as a very specific recommendation, when I am engaging a group to recommend that we go in a different direction, one of the promises that I make, and I have always kept, is to say, as we move forward, if this doesn't work or if we need to adjust it, we will. We're going to have predetermined points at which we will do a check-in and see, are we getting the results we anticipated? And going into it, acknowledging that I don't know what I don't know myself. So there may be some gaps there and some gaps that I'm counting on them to help me fill and then to alert me to. But we will be sharing in the credit of the success together. So we like to believe that we are rational creatures and that we are all about the facts. Just give me the numbers, just the data. That's all that matters. Give me the budget, give me the space configuration, give me the process, whatever it is. And clearly that is important. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And we all have emotions, and we are created with those emotions so that we can survive and thrive and make use of them. And so I believe that you need to be mindful of both elements. Understanding the what, the how, the why, any applicable history. What's the data? What are the numbers? What are you trying to accomplish? What will it cost? How long will it take? How many people need to be engaged in this process? Who else needs to be part of it? But also, equally essential, and often the one aspect that is most likely not explored, is the emotional piece. Well, how does this make you feel? What is happening? Are you feeling threatened by this change? Do you feel a fear of not being able to adapt to the change? So in a work setting, a change in a process, a change in a procedure, a change in membership in a particular team, in a particular title, involves a sense of loss as well. And so you want to think about those individuals whose behaviors, not just their titles, but whose behaviors, their talents, their organizational placement perhaps, but their way of engaging with you are going to help you get to where you want to be. So I'll give you one example. The organization nationally had decided to implement a particular technology to deliver training because there just were not enough funds available to send everyone to have them go travel. Most of the money for training was being spent on travel funds, not on actual learning opportunities. And to address that, a preceding leader had agreed to fund a technical training, a video training procedure, which was one that was not particularly welcome because people like the traditional way of doing things. You know, why do I have to talk to you via Zoom when I can sit in a room next to you? Well, we just don't have the money. And so we had the charge to transform all of the content and to roll out all of the training in that fashion, when some of the folks who either owned part of the process or owned the staff that was going to receive it were not welcoming the process. And so I had to step back and think about who will benefit from this, who is seen as a leader within the group, who is willing to take a chance, who might I approach about enabling them to have some special opportunities for the staff with some end-of-year money that I might have, that they might need and have not been able to access. How might I create some opportunities for them? Who might be willing to trust me? So this is the time to call in my chits. And that's what I did. And I created this coalition. And the good news is that they ended up not only understanding the circumstance, understanding what it meant for them to be able to do it, but they, who had far greater influence than I had, organizationally, placement, etc., were the ones who carried the water for me and made it their initiative. And I was perfectly happy for them to get all the credit for making this happen, all the recognition, all the leadership. I was perfectly happy to have behind the scenes because it took care of everything that I needed to do. So it became a real win-win. It went from never going to happen to absolutely win-win. So in my interest in having us participate earlier in the process, I had selected an individual who was at a high enough level of the organization to, he was a director of a group under me, and I assigned him as the lead person, thinking that he would be modeling the behavior that I wanted his subordinates to follow, and selected him to represent our office at a meeting with peers at his level on that would be engaging with him in the new process. He was somebody who was, and I did not realize this at the time, not entirely trustworthy and very bitter. He was somebody who was particularly not comfortable with the other then young female of a different background leading the organization, and didn't think he really needed to pay attention to that. So he called in sick twice on days when that team was to meet. I did not know that that was when the team was meeting, but he left us high and dry. And the impression it left for the others was that what I was saying that we would be doing was actually not true. We were not going to do that because he had failed to show up. He didn't even have the courtesy to say, I'm ill and I cannot come in today. And that was the beginning of interesting conversation with this gentleman as to how he wanted to spend the rest of his career while I was there, because this was simply not untenable, and it was very visible to the rest of the staff. That's what he was doing. So once I realized what had transpired, first of all, I pulled him out of that role, lateraled him into a different role, didn't lose any salary, none of that stuff, but could no longer serve as the leader in this position, and begged for forgiveness from the others. And I was able to name someone else and move forward with the process and so on. But for a few weeks there, it was touch and go, and caught me really by surprise because I had never experienced somebody acting in such a inappropriate way, so openly, and so on. But it's interesting when things like that happen. This person had been very inappropriate in their dealings with me, and I was their new manager. But it served to underscore the validity of claims that I had received, the conversations I had with his subordinate staff, sharing stories about how they had not been treated fairly. And when you first hear it, you want to listen, but you of course want to have a sense of how accurate this is and so on. But having experienced the manner in which he engaged with me, it only underscored that that's exactly how he was engaging with his direct reports. First and foremost, advice that I received from one of my longtime mentors, a gentleman named Paul Barnes, who was an executive at Social Security and just an extraordinarily gifted individual. I was in attendance at a meeting with him. I had just met him recently. I was not an executive at the time. I was in a high-level staff position, and there was a discussion about a need for change of a particular process. And I had blurted out some very negative comments about it. Couldn't help myself, and hadn't really thought through what I was saying or the context in which I was saying it. And so he very kindly and very generously, because that was a gift, pulled me aside after the conversation and said, privately, and said, you must learn to make change your friend. You must learn to make change your friend. It is inevitable, it happens, it's part of the human condition. We've been evolving since we arrived on this earth, however we got here. And we must continuously do that. So rather than thinking of change as a threat or a negative, let's think about how might we manage it? What might we gain from it? There may be some things we don't care for, but what do we get out of it? I appreciate that change is very personal and can trigger fears in us about, are we up to it? Will we be able to do it? Will I lose status? Will I be not seen in the same way? If my title goes from being manager of to being assistant to, does that diminish me? Because oftentimes when people resist some element of change, it's because at some deep level they fear that they in some way will be diminished. And we tend to overvalue what we have and undervalue what we may gain.